Marvin Heemeyer of Granby, Colorado, was a deeply frustrated muffler repairman who felt trapped in a web of injustice. By the late 1990s, after years of protests, petitions, and town meetings, it became clear to the 52-year-old that he was ensnared in a corrupt system. He believed that the mayor and city council had ruined his business through shady zoning changes. When he was forced to give up his legal fight and sell his land, Heemeyer hatched a final, sinister plan to transform his muffler shop into a machine for revenge. Heemeyer's love for Colorado began during his Air Force service. After his discharge, he moved to Grand Lake and opened a chain of muffler shops in the area, leasing most of them, but keeping one, Mountain View Muffler in Granby, for himself. From the start, Heemeyer was involved in local politics. He was generally well-liked, but those close to him knew his volatile side. A staunch advocate for legalizing gambling, Heemeyer published newsletters to share his views. "If Marv was your friend, he was your best friend," said a close associate. "But if he decided you were his enemy, he was your worst and most dangerous enemy." In the late 1990s, the Doshef family approached Marvin Heemeyer with an offer to buy his muffler shop for a concrete batch plant. Heemeyer had purchased the land for $42,000, and Doshef initially agreed to buy it for $250,000. However, the deal collapsed when Heemeyer raised the price to $375,000, and at one point even mentioned $1 million. Frustrated by Heemeyer's indecisiveness, the Doshefs appealed to the Granby City Council to rezone the land around his shop. Heemeyer was actively involved in the rezoning process from the beginning, attending town meetings to protect his interests. Despite his efforts, in 2001, the Town Zoning Commission and trustees approved the rezoning request. To add insult to injury, the planned concrete plant would block the only access route to his muffler shop. Additionally, the city fined Heemeyer $2,500 for having junk cars on his property and for not hooking his shop up to the sewer line. Determined but not defeated, Heemeyer fought back through community action and legal challenges. He appealed the zoning decision and collected signatures from the townspeople to petition against the plant. He even purchased a bulldozer to build a new road for access to his shop, but the city council rejected his plan. While many suspected corruption between the concrete plant and city council, no evidence of illegal activity was found. With no other options, Heemeyer sent the city a $2,500 check to pay the fines, writing "cowards" on the memo line. He then sold the muffler shop property to a trash company and was given 6 months to vacate. Marvin Heemeyer began his final drastic project almost immediately. The Komatsu D3335A bulldozer, initially intended to save his business, was moved into his muffler shop and transformed into a machine of vengeance. Heemeyer fortified the bulldozer with homemade composite armor. He installed front and rear cameras that fed images to monitors inside the cab and outfitted the vehicle with several gun ports. Inside, he stored a stockpile of food, water, and an air tank for ventilation. For a year and a half, Heemeyer meticulously documented his progress with notes and audio tapes. "Because of your anger, because of your malice, because of your hate, you would not work with me," he declared in his recordings. "I am going to sacrifice my life, my miserable future that you gave me, to show you that what you did is wrong." Despite several visitors coming to his shop during this period, none seemed alarmed by the weaponized bulldozer taking shape. Heemeyer credited a higher power with clouding their vision. He noted, "I was always willing to be reasonable until I had to be unreasonable. Sometimes reasonable men must do unreasonable things." 2004 was a particularly tough year for Heemeyer. His father passed away in March, and he ended his engagement after discovering his fiancée with another man. On the gray and drizzly morning of Friday, June 4th, Heemeyer mailed his audio tapes to his brother, went to his shop, and climbed into his bulldozer with a handwritten list of targets. Using the winch controls, he lowered the 30-ton concrete and steel shell onto the vehicle, sealing himself inside a fortress from which he could never escape. Just after 3 p.m., Marvin Heemeyer's makeshift tank, known as the Killdozer, tore through the side of his shed and smashed into the Mountain Park concrete plant. Within moments, the 911 response center was inundated with frantic calls. In minutes, 2 buildings and multiple vehicles were destroyed, and the Killdozer rumbled towards the highway, heading into town. As the slow-moving bulldozer neared the city limits, it picked up a convoy of emergency vehicles. One police SUV was crushed when it ventured too close. When Heemeyer and his Killdozer arrived in Granby, the police were ready, but their weapons were ineffective against the fortified vehicle. When bullets failed, they tried explosives, but these too had no effect. The police evacuated residents from the Killdozer's path and used the reverse 911 system to warn the community. News helicopters circled above, capturing the unfolding mayhem. Despite its cumbersome nature, Heemeyer skillfully maneuvered the Killdozer to hit specific targets. The bulldozer flattened cars and buildings, including the home of a former mayor, the office of a newspaper that had criticized him, the businesses of a former city councilman, and the city hall. Remarkably, despite the extensive property damage, no one was injured or killed. The Granby police requisitioned an industrial scraper in a desperate attempt to counter Heemeyer's rampaging Killdozer, but the fortified vehicle easily shoved its lighter opponent aside. In about an hour, the bulldozer had demolished 13 structures and was heading towards its next target, Gamble's Hardware. However, the damage from small arms fire and the additional weight of the armor were taking their toll on the machine. The radiator began to leak, and the Killdozer started losing horsepower. As it crashed through the wall of the hardware store, the floor beneath it gave way, causing the front end to fall into a shallow basement. The engine struggled, but couldn't pull the bulldozer out of the pit. Surrounded by SWAT teams, a single muffled gunshot was heard from within the cab. The Killdozer fell silent, ending a 2-hour and 7-minute rampage that caused approximately $7 million in damage. Explosives failed to open the tank, so it took 12 hours with an oxyacetylene torch and a crane to crack the armored top. Inside, Heemeyer was found dead from a self-inflicted gunshot wound with a handgun. He was the sole casualty of his destructive spree. After Heemeyer was removed, police inventoried his numerous guns and found his list of targets, which included buildings, businesses, and names. To prevent rampage admirers from collecting memorabilia, the Killdozer was dismantled and its parts were scattered across various scrapyards.